There once was a man who tended a beautiful garden. Day by day, he pulled the weeds, watered the flowers, and watched as his garden flourished. But one day, a cunning thief crept in and planted poisonous seeds among the blossoms. The man, unaware, watered those seeds along with the flowers. Before long, the garden was choked with thorns and toxic vines, and the man found himself trapped in the very place he once loved. Have you ever felt this way? Trapped by the toxic growth of someone else's actions or words? Children of the Almighty God, today we face a truth that can be as painful as it is liberating. Some relationships, like the thief in the garden, plant seeds of manipulation, gaslighting, and delusion. We may try to confront them, to name their actions, to demand change. But these confrontations often leave us more entangled, more wounded. The question we must ask is not, how can I fix them? But, how can I guard the garden of my soul? In our journey together, we'll explore 4 things to never say to a narcissist. 4 pitfalls that only deepen the damage rather than heal it. C.S. Lewis wisely observed, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear." And in the maze of toxic relationships, our grief can indeed feel like fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of abandonment, fear of losing our own clarity. But take heart. God's wisdom offers a way through. Are you ready to explore this path of discernment, self-protection, and healing? In our journey through life, we often find ourselves walking paths filled with relationships that test our discernment, grace, and strength. Have you ever encountered someone who seems to distort reality, leaving you questioning your own judgment and self-worth? These are the moments where we must tread carefully, for the snares of manipulation and ego are subtle but devastating. The Apostle Paul's warning comes to mind. "But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ." 2 Corinthians 11:3. When dealing with someone who seeks control through a distorted self-image, someone whose arrogance wears a mask of charm, labeling them a narcissist may seem like a natural response. But my dear friends, doing so often leads to more harm than clarity. Their instinct for self-preservation, cloaked in manipulation, will spring to life. Instead of fostering understanding, such a confrontation provokes further gaslighting, blame, shifting, and self-justification. Suddenly, those who might otherwise support you, the enablers in their circle, can turn against you, and there you stand, wounded and bewildered. Remember, the goal of the narcissist is not truth, but control. To name their delusion is to threaten their carefully maintained image. What happens next? You may find yourself tangled in a web of accusations and guilt displaced onto you. The confrontation escalates, and their manipulation intensifies. Gaslighting can make you question even your most solid memories and perceptions. You may feel trapped, wondering if you are the problem, if your pain is just an overreaction. This is how a toxic relationship thrives, by dismantling your self-worth. In these moments of confusion and emotional trauma, the Lord's wisdom becomes your refuge. Rather than direct confrontation, lean on prayer and discernment. As C.S. Lewis reminds us, the prayer preceding all prayers is, "May it be the real I who speaks. May it be the real thou that I speak to." God's truth does not rely on labels or confrontations. It rests in clarity, humility, and grace. Resist the urge to confront the narcissist with a name. Instead, protect your heart and spirit through quiet resolve and divine wisdom. Consider this. By refusing to engage in their game of ego, You remove their power over you. Your silence becomes a shield, and your restraint becomes a source of strength. The auto-defensive walls they build to maintain their delusions will crumble, not through your accusations, but through the weight of their own insolence and superficiality. Be patient, for truth, though quiet, always stands firm. What does this mean for us as believers? It means that our responsibility lies not in fixing others, but in guarding our hearts against manipulation and self-deception. It means understanding that confrontation can sometimes be a futile endeavor, leading us away from peace. The path to emotional healing begins with recognizing when to speak and when to hold your peace, trusting that God's justice prevails even when ours falters. In this delicate dance of boundaries and grace, we open the door to another challenge. How do we respond when our reality is questioned, twisted, and denied? How do we withstand the subtle pressures that seek to reshape our truth? Gaslighting is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation, a twisting of reality that leaves you standing in a fog of self-doubt. Have you ever tried to explain your truth to someone who insists with unwavering confidence that your perception is wrong, that your memory is flawed, that you are the one who's confused? When faced with such relentless distortion, it's tempting to point the finger and declare, "You are gaslighting me." But my dear friends, this accusation rarely achieves what we hope. A person who gaslights often believes in their own constructed reality. Their manipulation isn't always a calculated performance. It's a defense mechanism, born from a need to maintain control. Accusing them only reinforces their delusion, causing them to double down on their tactics. They may react with threats of abandonment, leaving you feeling trapped, alone, and emotionally destabilized. In moments like these, we must remember that the battle is not just one of words, but of the spirit. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. The fight against gaslighting is not a fight for dominance. It is a fight for clarity, for truth, and for peace. Calling out gaslighting directly often invites more manipulation, more blame shifting, and more guilt displaced onto you. It becomes a cycle that erodes your sense of reality. The gaslighter may twist your accusation, painting you as paranoid or unstable. They wield guilt like a weapon, claiming your confrontation is unfair, even unloving. Before you know it, you're defending yourself against accusations that shouldn't exist. In these moments of instability, what can you do? Hold fast to your own truth, even if it feels fragile. Anchor yourself in God's unwavering reality. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. Psalm 145:18. You don't need to convince the gaslighter of reality. You need to protect your reality. Quietly affirm what you know to be true, and let your confidence in God's truth be your defense. Recognize that confronting a gaslighter may not change them, but it doesn't have to change you. Your worth, your perception, your clarity are not dependent on their acceptance. In a relationship steeped in toxic manipulation, sometimes the wisest course is to step back, to resist the urge to confront, and to preserve your emotional and spiritual well-being. This path isn't easy. It requires acceptance radical enough to say, I cannot control their delusions, but I can guard my peace. It requires a willingness to let go of the need to be understood by those who refuse to see. In doing so, you find a quiet strength, a strength that prepares you for the next challenge, facing the illusion of change that never truly materializes. Change is a curious thing, isn't it? We all crave it in some form, in ourselves, in others, in our circumstances. But in relationships marked by manipulation and self-delusion, change becomes an illusion. When dealing with someone whose ego thrives on control and superficiality, the temptation to tell them, "You'll never change," can be strong. After all, we see the patterns, the arrogance, and the mask they wear. We recognize the false promises, the brief efforts that lead nowhere. But is declaring their inability to change truly helpful? The reality is that telling them they can't change may seem like a challenge to their ego, and to a narcissist, every challenge is an opportunity to perform. They may respond with a burst of effort to prove you wrong, but this change is often fleeting and performative. It lacks the depth of genuine transformation, for true change requires humility, self-awareness, and a willingness to accept responsibility. These are qualities a narcissist resists because they threaten the carefully crafted auto-image they cling to. In confronting them with their inability to change, you risk opening the door to more manipulation and gaslighting. They may twist your words, accusing you of being unloving or overly critical. "Why are you so negative?" they might say. You never believe in me." This tactic shifts the guilt onto you, making you question your own motives and perceptions. In the end, you're left feeling defensive and drained, caught in a cycle of self-doubt and frustration. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. The pain of hoping for someone's change and being disappointed again and again can be profound. But hope, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a burden. We must remember that our hope for change must rest not in others' fragile egos, but in God's unchanging nature. His plans for us are firm, even when others' actions are unstable. Consider this: true change is a divine process, rooted in humility and surrender. A heart resistant to repentance cannot be transformed by mere confrontation. We cannot force someone to abandon their delusions or accept their flaws. Our role is not to reshape them, but to guard ourselves against their toxicity while staying anchored in God's truth. It is an act of self-preservation, not selfishness, to accept that some people may never change. This acceptance is not abandonment of hope, but a shift of focus. Instead of fixating on their potential to change, redirect your energy to your own growth and healing. What areas of your life need forgiveness, healing, and restoration? Where have you allowed their instability to shake your faith and peace? When you release the need for them to change, you open space for God to work within you. His transformative power is not limited by others' resistance. In this process, you may face guilt displaced onto you, accusations that you are the one unwilling to grow or forgive. Stand firm. Remember that healthy relationships require mutual effort and responsibility. You're not obligated to carry the weight of their refusal to change. Each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Romans 14:12. Your responsibility is to walk in truth, grace, and self-respect. This journey of acceptance also means embracing realistic expectations. Let go of the fantasy that your words or actions can unlock their transformation. True change is between them and God. Your peace lies in recognizing your limits and leaning into God's boundless wisdom. In this space, you find freedom from the need to fix, heal, or confront them into change. And yet, in accepting their resistance, a new question emerges. How do we navigate the delicate path of forgiveness without giving them power over our hearts? How do we offer grace without becoming enablers of their toxic behavior? Forgiveness is one of the most challenging and misunderstood aspects of our spiritual journey. Have you ever felt the weight of someone's betrayal or manipulation and concluded with every fiber of your being that you simply cannot forgive them? In relationships marked by toxicity and gaslighting, the wounds run deep, and the idea of offering forgiveness can feel like surrendering control or validating their behavior. Yet, declaring to a narcissist that you don't forgive them often leads to further harm rather than healing. A narcissist thrives on a distorted sense of reality and a fragile ego. When you tell them you don't forgive, they hear an accusation against their character, a blow to the carefully crafted mask they present to the world. Instead of understanding your pain, they weaponize your lack of forgiveness. They may accuse you of being cold, unloving, or even arrogant. Suddenly, the focus shifts from their wrongdoing to your supposed guilt and resistance to reconciliation. In these moments, it's vital to remember that true forgiveness is not about granting power to the other person. It is about freeing your own heart. C.S. Lewis reminds us, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. Forgiveness does not mean excusing the harm done to you. It doesn't mean restoring a broken relationship or allowing continued manipulation. Rather, it means releasing the bitterness that poisons your spirit. When you declare, "I do not forgive you," you may feel a fleeting sense of power or control, but this declaration often invites more instability and confrontation. The narcissist will likely use your words to paint you as unreasonable, shifting the narrative in their favor. Their blame shifting can leave you questioning your own motives, eroding your sense of self-worth and spiritual clarity. The more you engage in this battle, the more entangled you become in their web of delusion. Forgiveness, then, becomes a quiet act of self-preservation and healing. It is not something you announce to the one who has hurt you, but something you offer in the sanctuary of your heart. Jesus taught us to forgive 70 times 7, Matthew 18:22, not for the sake of those who harm us, but for the peace it brings to our own souls. Forgiving silently in your spirit shields you from the gaslighting and manipulation that would follow a verbal confrontation. This path of forgiveness also protects your heart from the corrosive effects of bitterness. Refusing to forgive can harden your spirit, making you more vulnerable to self-deception and arrogance. It becomes easy to justify your own flaws while magnifying the faults of others. True forgiveness, given quietly and prayerfully, dismantles these defenses and opens your heart to God's grace. It is an act of radical acceptance, acknowledging the harm done, yet choosing not to let it define you. But forgiveness does not mean allowing continued harm. As believers, we are called to practice self-protection and discernment. Offering forgiveness does not make you an enabler. It does not require you to trust someone who is proven untrustworthy. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still walk away from a toxic relationship. In fact, setting boundaries is a form of honoring the life and dignity God has given you. In this delicate balance of forgiveness and self-defense, we learn to lean on God's strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. Psalm 18:2. He shields us from harm, even when others try to exploit our grace. Forgiveness, offered in faith, does not leave us vulnerable. It leaves us free from the chains of resentment, free to pursue healing and restoration. Yet, in this freedom, a new challenge arises. How do we protect our hearts from falling back into the cycle of self-deception and manipulation? How do we maintain our peace and clarity when the pressure to reconcile becomes overwhelming? As we journey through the tangled paths of toxic relationships, we begin to see that true freedom doesn't come from confronting others or forcing change upon them. Instead, it comes from guarding the garden of our soul, cultivating self-awareness, and leaning into God's unwavering truth. The world may try to distort reality, but as children of the Almighty, we stand anchored in His wisdom and grace. The challenge before us is to practice discernment and forgiveness while maintaining boundaries that protect our hearts. We can resist manipulation without falling into bitterness, and we can extend grace without becoming enablers. As C.S. Lewis reminds us, God can't give us peace and happiness apart from Himself, because there is no such thing. Our peace lies not in controlling others, but in trusting God to work His justice and healing in His time. As you reflect on these truths, ask yourself, where in my life do I need to let go of the need to fix someone else? How can I protect my heart while walking in God's grace and truth? Share your thoughts and experience in the comments below. Your journey may be the encouragement someone else needs. If this message spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe to continue receiving wisdom and encouragement. Together, we can cultivate gardens of peace, guarded by grace and nurtured by God's love.